Hey guys, it's Tony from the Flopbuster Movie Show with a new series of videos me and Gabe are going to be doing. It's going to be called Our First Horror Film. These are going to be films that we saw for the first time that really ignited that love for horror. We could talk about other genres maybe, like first action movie, first comedy, but horror really hits a note for me and Gabe. We're both huge horror fans. He's got like a ton of Freddy Krueger tattoos and he's a huge Freddy fan. I too love Wes Craven and all things Wes Craven, which brings me to my pick. This is my first horror film. I could have gone with a lot of different options. The thing with horror was I grew up in a house where at the tail end of the VHS days, the beginning of DVD really taking over, my house was filled with VHS and my cousins, my aunt who was in high school, really watching a lot of the 90s slasher movies. So I want to say this was around 2000 or 2001 that I saw this film for the first time. Actually, it's two really on the same day. I had to be like 5 years old. I could have gone with the obvious answer of Halloween. I saw this around the same time, but I don't think I saw Halloween in full until maybe 7 or 8 years old. It was actually this VHS tape, too. This is the packaged one, so I've never opened it. But it was this version of it that I saw for the first time. But that's not the film I'm going to be talking about, or films I'll be talking about, because I feel like everybody can pick Halloween. I saw parts of it as a kid, and then really around 6 or 7 was when I first remember watching the entire movie without being just completely scared. So it's these two films I probably saw like a year before in full. I'm picking Scream. Wes Craven, Kevin Williamson, the iconic cast. Yeah, Wes Craven's Scream. Now, I saw this when I was a kid, and I remember it clearly. My aunt, who used to watch, again, any of these movies from time to time, any of these 90s slasher, like the Dimension stuff, she watched, it was middle of like a Saturday, I want to say. She was watching this one, and this guy back to back. Both films where I remember just the imagery perfectly. Especially Sleepy Hollow, and there's so much in there, the gothic imagery that really just like just stayed in my brain as a kid. That and Scream, for many of you may know, I'm like a huge fan of the entire franchise. That's something that's always been in my heart forever. It's like a perfect movie for me. It really started my love for horror films, but it was also one I wasn't really afraid of. I've always found the Scream movies to be more fun than anything. But yeah, it was Scream and Sleepy Hollow were my first two horror films. And I gotta say, they're both films that like hold up, and whenever I talk about my favorite horror films, they're both always around my top 10 for sure. If I'm being unbiased, they're definitely in there. If I'm being completely biased, they'd probably be in the top 5 or something. But those are two films that I just like completely, just the imagery always stuck with me, and they were films that were always on around the house. And you know, Sleepy Hollow is an underrated one for sure. This is one I always bring up to people. Again, very similar VHS tape to the one that I saw. I think the one that I saw had like the Blockbuster stickers on it still, but Scream definitely had Blockbuster Presents. I haven't found that one yet. This is just a standard one that I found at like the thrift store or something. So yeah, those are my two introductions into horror, was Scream and Sleepy Hollow, and then I want to say Halloween was around that time or a little after, and then Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th Part 2. That was the one that I saw first. And Hellraiser, oddly. But it was really these two where I remember for years being in that living room, watching my aunt put these on VHS. My cousins are around, my sister, and it really started that love affair with horror films right there. I'm sure we all have like films that we remember fondly of that probably don't hold up. But then there's some that just like stay with you for a while, and these are two that mean a lot to me, especially Sleepy Hollow as well. And it's one that's not talked about enough, but it's one of the most beautiful looking horror films I've ever seen and still have ever seen. The cinematography in that, the Hammer horror style that Tim Burton goes with, the blood splatter, the casting, the slapstick humor. It's 100% one of my favorites, and one that's not nearly talked about as much. But anyway, I mean, the question is, what was your introduction in horror? What film do you remember fondly, or do you think, yeah, this was the first time I really fell in love with horror, or I was aware of like horror films in general? I know Gabe's gonna have his pick. It's probably gonna be Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's face it. But that was something I wanted to bring up within a series of videos, us talking about our introduction into horror films. Anyway, guys, let me know what your introduction to horror is. Comment below. Maybe it's Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. I feel like it's always one of the big guys that really introduces us to this world that we all love. And don't forget to subscribe, like, check out the Flopbuster Movie Show. We have a new episode dropping Friday that's going to be mob movies. And then Gabe's episode of his introduction into horror should drop sometime this week, maybe early next week. And then we're also going to have some new reviews as well. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Comment below, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you Friday.